Let's talk about the Bruno Fernandes situation, a situation that has left many of us confused. But when I asked you guys on my X account, @ScarletReport, as well as on YouTube, whether we can live without Bruno, the majority of you said yes. And I think that I agree with that sentiment in the sense that we have to learn how to move on. Okay, but it was hard for many of you to answer, I'm sure, just as it was hard for me to answer. Just like a Scarlet Report viewer, Ian Nicholson, who said, bro, I can't answer that question. Come on, what do you want from me? Because it is definitely a tough question to answer. But of course, I would be lying if I said that I was not thrilled when I woke up this morning to the news that Bruno Fernandes actually decided to stay at Manchester United next season. Finally, we get to keep our talismanic leader. And yeah, I'm absolutely ecstatic. And not only for what he brings on the pitch, but also because Bruno Fernandes is a man of values. And here, before I get into the heart of what I want to talk about, let me just talk about this quick anecdote, because I'm sure many of you remember, but back in May 2018, there was an infamous event that happened in Portugal. Basically, a mob of 50, I don't know, let's call them thugs, right? Entered Sporting Club Portugal's training grounds, and they assaulted the players with belts and sticks. In fact, many of them were severely injured. In fact, Bas Dost, who was their Dutch center forward at the time, 34 goals that season, pretty much the equivalent of Gyökeres for them this season, was really badly hurt, injuries on the skull. Infamous event. And of course, as a result, and naturally so, a lot of Sporting Lisbon's, a lot of their best players actually asked to terminate their contracts, or at least put pressure on the club to sell them, which eventually, lowered Sporting's bargaining power vis-a-vis the other European clubs. So they sold some serious talent, players like Gelson Martins, for example, to Atletico Madrid, William Carvalho, who has been linked to Manchester United just a few years before that, to Betis, and then, of course, a guy you definitely heard of, Rafael Leao, to Lille, a player who in 1 or 2 years they could have sold for 50 million. So it was a big, major blow for Sporting. But there was one guy who did not abandon Sporting in that unfortunate event, okay, in those tough times. And that was Bruno Fernandes, who was already a key player for them, but who grew even more in stature and became, a cult hero among the Sporting fans. So he stayed at Sporting, even though Spurs and Liverpool were showing interest in him at the time. And then he helped Sporting eventually the following season win the equivalent of the League Cup and the FA Cup before eventually moving to Manchester United for a big fee. So this actually just shows us his character. I'm going to go as far as to say that if I'm looking for a friend, I'm looking for someone like Bruno Fernandes, because that's a guy who's going to stand next to you against the odds, okay? He's going to be by your side no matter what. And just as he did not abandon Sporting, he's not abandoning Manchester United right now, because we need all of the on-pitch talent that we need. And in the case of Bruno, he's not really a problematic player. He's actually quite a good influence on the young players, great media presence, and great influence in the dressing room. You combine this with the immense talent that he has, and then I simply can't think of a reason why we'd want to get rid of him. But of course, for many people, me included, when I looked at all of the factors in the Bruno Fernandes equation, every time the results just came out as he's going to accept the offer. Because that offer made sense logically whenever you looked at the factors involved. Mainly, Manchester United's financial situation, his suitability to Ruben Amorim's tactical system, as well as, of course, the financial benefits him and his family could reap from such a move to such a rich Saudi club. But this is where I need to talk about this guy, Plato, right here, and his analogy of the cave. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but basically what Plato talks about, and this was like, so many years ago, basically what he says is, imagine the following scenario, okay? So imagine you tie the group of people since they were born, so for the entirety of their lives, in a cave where they're facing a wall without the ability to look at what's behind them. And all they could see are shadows. And of course, oblivious to the facts that behind them, there is a light source and there are puppeteers, just people with cutouts of animals and objects, putting it in front of the light source so that those people who are in chains can look at the shadows. So pretty much what this is that the people who are in chains looking at the wall, the shadows are their reality. What they see there is their reality. That's the only thing they know. And for them, those shadows are real. Okay, so they worship them. Okay, they interact with them because that's all they know. Oblivious, of course, to the facts that they are just a mere illusion. Now, imagine if one of those people who are chained to the wall just simply finds a way out and then leaves the cave and eventually understands that those shadows are just a reflection. I don't know how to explain it. A reflection and interaction between lights and objects, and that actually there is a whole world outside, a whole world of possibilities, okay? And that's what this analogy is. It's an extremely important model if you want to be able to discern between facts and illusions. And this is extremely important in today's world, especially with social media, with fake news, with clickbait, with rage bait. Pretty much everything that you read online has to be examined, including this video. Okay? Everything that you interact with online. And when we look at the Bruno Fernandes question from the first perspective, okay, the illusion. Of course, yeah, he should take that offer and he should go and sign for Ali because we believe that that's what everybody wants. So let's take these factors one by one. So when we talk about Manchester United's financial health, that 100 or 120 million pounds from Al Ahly becomes a necessity because we've all heard that Manchester United are not doing well financially. We've all seen the austerity measures that Ineos have been implementing at Manchester United. We've all witnessed all of the bad financial decisions that the club has made in the past, spending huge amounts of money on players with very little return. And of course, the Glazers, those fucking Glazers, and the debt that they have brought on the club in their 2005 hostile takeover, leverage takeover, of the club. So yes, many people believe, Manchester United are in a bad financial situation. We are not going to be in Europe next season. So yeah, we definitely need that 100 million because otherwise, how are we going to build? How are we going to pay for that rebuild that we so desperately need? The second factor, Ruben Amorim and the unsuitability of Bruno Fernandes to his tactics. Sure, if we had a project where we had to create the ultimate player that would fit into that number 8 double pivot position, as well as that number 10 attacking midfielder position in Ruben Amorim's system, all of us, including me, would create players that are quite a bit different from Bruno Fernandes in terms of profile, in terms of attributes, etc. In midfield, you probably would want someone who is a little bit more of an engine, a space eater, someone who's a great ball carrier, more of an athlete. Whereas in the attacking midfield, you'd look for like tucked in wingers who can dribble, someone like Ryan Sharkey, for example, or Mbemu or Cunha for that matter. But Bruno Fernandes would be way down the pecking order. So then you could say, okay, well, if he doesn't really fit with Ruben Amorim's vision for the system, the tactical system he wants to implement at Manchester United, then again, why would he stay and why would Manchester United keep him? Same thing, the third factor, which is Bruno Fernandes and how he benefits financially from such a deal. Come on, guys, the human brain cannot comprehend those fees and those amounts of money that we are talking about. So who would be mad enough to turn down such an offer? But of course, this all lead to us thinking that, of course, Bruno Fernandes, the logical thing would be him signing for Al Ahly. This is why I was prepared for it. This is why I was coping when I made that Alex Baena video, a player that I adore and who I think could be a like-for-like replacement for Bruno Fernandes. But I admit, I made that video. There was an emotional reason behind me making that video. Is because somewhat, even though I'm quite stoic, in life, somewhat I could not just come to terms with the fact that Bruno would leave, okay? But all of this is the shadow part, the illusion part, because we are looking at it the same way. Those people who are tied in chains in the cave, looking at the wall, looking at those shadows, look at it. But the moment we examine each of these factors, the moment we step up, and we leave the cave and we explore the world around us, a new reality comes to mind. A new reality reveals itself. And so let me explain here. So when we talk about the first factor, which is the financial situation of Manchester United, well, actually, is it? Is it that bad? Our financial situation is definitely worse than it used to be, but it is not a black hole, a financial black hole that we cannot crawl ourselves or claw ourselves out, okay? It is bad, relatively speaking, to other years when Manchester United were much better performing financially, but it definitely doesn't mean that we are facing administration, okay? As much as we talk about the debt of the Glazers, and yes, we need to optimize that. We need to get rid of it. We need to lower the amount of interest that we pay. But you have to understand something, that debt is part of growth in the business world. In fact, in economics, there is no government that does not have debt. There is no company that does not have debt, okay? Now, when that debt is manageable, that's fine. In the case of Manchester United, it is not crippling debt. It has never stopped us from spending loads of money. I mean, look at our history, our spending history. We've been one of the biggest spenders in the world. I think, I don't have the data in front of me, but I think we are top 5 over the past 10 years in terms of fee spend, maybe top 3, okay? So it's not a matter of how much we spend, is how we spend it. Did you know that Manchester United has, as of March 31st this year, we have over 90 million pounds of cash. That's actual cash in the bank that can be used. When you consider the fact that all transfers are made with installments, take, for example, the Cunha transfer, 62.5 million. We are not paying 62.5 million now. We're paying 20 million now, 20 million the next year and 20 million the year after. So that means that we already do have enough funds for us to go and spend 250 million pounds this summer, especially when you factor in other players that are less important than Bruno Fernandes, who could also generate some extra funds, mainly Garnacho, for example. I think that's a player we could sell for 45 to 60 million pounds. No problem. I think that's the fee that many clubs were willing to spend spend on him in the winter. So again, our situation has been better, financial situations, but it's not as bad as you think. And those austerity measures by Ineos, look, I've said it before, but I do have a business and economics background. So what they are doing, it's classic lean production, okay? Classic lean production. You have to have a machine that is quite efficient in terms of operations and in terms of financial, sustainability, okay? We are not efficient. And so they are turning the organization into an efficient, lean machine. The other thing is also, there is an element of corporate culture in there. If you want to change the culture, you have to change it throughout the organization. That means if you want to have high standards for the playing squad, there also needs to be high standards for everybody else, for the marketing team, for the human resource team, for, the logistics team or the commercial team or whatever, okay? So there are a lot of people who have been hurt by that. And on a human level, that's definitely something that I can sympathize with. We can debate the ethics of it. That's fine. But that's across business. In the 2008 financial crisis, a lot of people lost their homes. A lot of people lost their savings. And yet the banks who were responsible got bailed out. So yeah, I mean, let's riot against the world, okay? Because unfortunately, this is just the world of finance. This is how it works. If you want to be a successful business, you have to be lean. And that's what Ineos are doing. But does it mean that we are in a bad financial situation? No. It means we are kind of managing the situation and we can still spend a lot. So again, now we move from the shadows to the reality right here. The reality is that we can afford a rebuild and we can strengthen our squad even if we don't sell Bruno Fernandes. That 100 million is not required for that. And as evidenced by the statement of Bruno Fernandes staying, where it says that the club says they don't need the money. That's it. That came from the club. Now let's talk about the second factor, Ruben Amorim. So there are a lot of things that I can say about this idea that Bruno Fernandes does not fit the system, because again, it's something that I agree with if you are looking at it in absolute terms. Okay, that means like if you had to pick a first 11 using the 3-4-3 system and following the characteristics that Ruben Amorim wants, and you had access to pretty much any player in the world, you probably would not pick Bruno Fernandes. Okay, there are other players that are probably much suited to that. But again, like I said, there is a lot to say about this. It's much more nuanced than that. First of all, Ruben Amorim. I have to tell you this. Okay, there is a reason why I did not talk about Erik ten Hag when he got sacked at Manchester United. It's because when we first signed Erik ten Hag, I said this about him, okay? Especially, I think it was the Casemiro video, because I was kind of surprised, even though I was happy that we signed a player of the caliber of Casemiro, the switch from targeting Frankie de Jong to moving towards Casemiro, which to me was, it didn't make sense. If you're looking, they are like polar opposites to each other. To me, that was kind of a red flag, because I was like, okay, how do you do that? Like, what's the plan here? And I said in that video that Erik ten Hag deserves the right to try things and to turn us into a successful club his own way. Basically, he has the right to experiment, and if he fails, he has the right to fail his way. But ultimately, he's the one who is responsible. So especially when it comes to recruitment, I think Erik ten Hag, while I did appreciate his tactics, I think in terms of discipline, he was also quite a potent coach, and he did win us trophies, which was definitely good, especially since we haven't won in 6 years. But his recruitment was all over the place. Okay, I think the club should have protected him from himself, but of course, it didn't serve us right. So, in my opinion, he got what he deserved because he was responsible. So he made those decisions and then he ended up paying for it by getting sacked, okay? Same thing with Ruben Amorim. So a few weeks ago, after a loss, there were so many, so I don't remember which loss that was. But Ruben Amorim said, I know what the problems are and I know how to fix them. That means you can be sure if he thought that Bruno Fernandes not being suitable to his system was an issue, then you can be certain, especially someone like Amorim. You know, he's a kickboxer, isn't he? Doesn't he do MMA or something like that? Don't mess with that guy. You know, he knows what he needs to do and he's going to go all the way. Didn't he say that if things don't work out, he's just going to quit? That's just how determined that dude, he's a dude, that dude is, you know? And then during the postseason tour in Asia, when asked about Bruno Fernandes potentially leaving, listen, again, I follow geopolitics and there are so many diplomatic ways. You could use diplomatic language to kind of say in a tactful way, yeah, I'm kind of indifferent or I want that guy out, right? For example, what Ruben Amorim could have said is something along the lines of saying like, oh, you know, Bruno is a Manchester United legend and he gets to choose what he wants to do. That gives you plausible deniability, you know, whether he leaves or he stays, you've covered your ground. And also you're kind of, it tells Bruno that you're kind of indifferent, whether you go or you stay, I don't really care. But Ruben Amorim chose a different approach, okay? So he went full charm offensive. What he said was like, oh, Bruno is extremely important to us. I want him to captain the side next year. I want him and I'm planning with him in the squad next year. This doesn't sound to me like a manager who sees Bruno as a liability, you know, a luxury player that he needs to accommodate in his system. No, he actually sees him as an integral part of his system. And I gotta say this because I've read many of your comments, guys, and I want to, I just want to say this, that I really appreciate it. You know, sometimes you guys say, well, listen, you know, Scarlett, even though that's not really my name. Scarlett, you know, I like your videos because, you know, you're not clickbaity, you know, or you don't rant about players or you don't spread negativity or something. But that's quite easy for me because I've been educated in a way where humility is quintessential to you being a person in this society. So I know a lot about football and I'm constantly learning about it. And a lot of people on the internet, a lot of people who have YouTube channels, you know, a lot of pundits, etc. A lot of people who have, blogs, as well as X accounts, Instagram accounts. There are a lot of people who know about football, okay? A lot of people care about football and there are a lot of football geeks out there, you know. I know that a lot of you watching my videos also know a lot about football because I read your comments and you guys are quite knowledgeable about what you talk about. But even the most knowledgeable among us would need to, go on, professional development, a journey of certifications, of internships, of badges for like, I don't know, 10, 15 years before they can reach the level of understanding that a black belt football manager like Ruben Amorim has. Do you understand? So I'm never going to turn on my camera and start speaking like I know more than the manager. So if Ruben Amorim, who is the guy with the system, right? If in his eyes, Bruno is an extremely important player who can play a massive role in his tactics, then who are we to say, no, you don't know your system better than us? Do you understand? And then there is another element to it. Again, like you have to be quite nuanced with how you approach this topic. It's not a black or white kind of situation. But the way people judge whether a player fits a system or not, and sometimes I'm guilty of that as well, is that, for example, with Ruben Amorim, you'd look at his sporting side, okay? You'd look at Erik ten Hag at Ajax, and then you would create models, okay, of the players. You'd look at Quenda, you'd look at Gyökeres, you'd look at Trincao, at Iñárritu, etc. And then you'll say, okay, these are the players needed in order to make the system work. But what a lot of people fail to understand, or at least they don't pay much attention to, is the fact that a lot of managers, when they are in these mid-tier clubs, Sporting, RC Lens, okay, Frankfurt, etc., Even though these clubs are quite competent when it comes to recruitment and they have directors of football that provide a clear direction, they still have limited resources. That means that those managers, many times they don't get their primary targets. Sometimes they would get 2 or 3 players who fit the profile and then 6 or 7 who don't. And then they'll have to find a way of making them work. That means that when we look at them in the past, for example, Ruben Amorim at Sporting, what we are saying is Ruben Amorim making the most out of what he had at Sporting. But we don't know what Ruben Amorim's vision is with the resources he has at his disposal at Manchester United. I'll give you an example. Pep Guardiola, we know what he's all about. But you see the progression of his system from Barcelona to the current Manchester City team. He went from favoring, false 9 strikers, the likes of David Villa or Lionel Messi or Pedro, etc., into moving towards using players like Lewandowski and Holland. All of these strikers are completely, different, in terms of profile to one another. Same thing in terms of defense. His Barcelona team was built on flying wingbacks, the likes of Dani Alves. And yet at Manchester City, he plays with 4 centre-backs. Inverting some of them or pushing someone like John Stones, into a libero role, pushing him into the midfield. So he's always adapting his tactics. So we don't know, again, what's in Ruben Amorim's mind. The tactical vision solely belongs to him. And we cannot pretend that we know better, that like we don't live in his brain. We don't know what's going on, right? So if he feels that Bruno Fernandes has a role to play, then Bruno Fernandes has a role to play. The final thing is, of course, the benefits that Bruno might reap from the financial benefits from such a move. Well, actually, there's a thing called diminishing returns. Okay, so for us, for me, at my job, if they offered me a promotion tomorrow with a 100% raise, that's the dream, Okay, fine, because we are regular people, regular workers. But when you are a millionaire like Bruno, doubling the amount of millions you get is not as attractive. Okay, so the richer you get, the less attractive it becomes. But also, like I said, he's a man of values, and his values are about helping the club, like leaving Manchester United as a hero, as a proper legend. Plus, he also said that he still wants to compete. And another thing, he's 31. Here's the thing, like Bruno is midfield royalty, similar to players like Modric, like De Bruyne. These players, like Modric right now, he's mooted to move to AC Milan. Igletar, the new director of football, wants him. He's 39, isn't he? AC Milan, right? So these players, they will always be in high demand. So Bruno, when he's 37, 38, he could still move to Saudi Arabia and reap those financial benefits. He could even become the new face of the MLS, the way Lionel Messi is currently. He's in no rush. Plus, he's a player with a great engine. He may not be the fastest, he may not be the most explosive, but his natural fitness, his stamina, he's like a marathon runner, and he's never injured. So yeah, this is a player who still is going to have longevity. So now, as we step away from the shadows and from the shackles, and we look at the big picture with a new perspective, fresh eyes, Bruno Fernandes staying is unequivocally the rational decision. And it is an amazing news for Manchester United, and you should definitely be excited about this. Because what this tells me is Bruno Fernandes himself did not want to leave. Ruben Amorim wants him. So Ruben Amorim's arm is not being twisted by Ineos to force him to accept Bruno Fernandes. No. And Ineos, who we say, they're just after the money, they're just greedy, they're saying we don't need the money. We can still rebuild our squad with our own finances, with our own operations. We don't need to sell our best player. So if we want to have a chance of achieving great things in the next 2 seasons, we need to have a collection of great players. And Bruno Fernandes is definitely one of them. Okay? So this is absolutely great news. And I think that at least in my opinion, I'm really excited about Cunha, really excited about Mbemu. If you can get someone like Gyökeres, for example, up front with a defensive midfielder, someone who is energetic and all action, box-to-box midfielder, while at the same time keeping Bruno Fernandes, guys, absolute cinema. And so, ironically, Manchester United's best transfer this season did not cost a penny. Bruno Fernandes, you absolute legend. So guys, let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Until next time, cheers.